Hey, it's Dave Hompes here. Welcome to the first video that we are going to do on heartburn. Now, this is a really important topic, and the main reason it's an important topic is that heartburn is extremely common, and while most people pass it off as just an everyday part of life, it isn't an everyday part of life. It's not normal to have heartburn. It means that there's something going on in your digestive system that shouldn't really be going on. And so what I want to do is just clarify and elucidate in this first video really what heartburn is, not go into too much detail, but just give a broad overview, talk about why it's dangerous to leave heartburn alone and not treat it. And then what we're going to do over the forthcoming video series is we're going to dive deeply into heartburn, look at all the reasons it happens so that it gives you an idea on what to investigate. And then hopefully once you've investigated the underlying cause, you'll be able to find a solution that enables you to alleviate the heartburn so that it never comes back, or at least very rarely comes back. So I think probably everybody's had a little bit of heartburn from time to time. I have certainly had my fair share. In fact, heartburn was the main reason that I got into functional medicine, because it was probably the number one symptom that was bothering me when I had H Pylori all the way back in 2006, 2007. And so it's a symptom that's quite dear to my heart in many ways. Now, how many people have heartburn? Well, we said most people have had it from time to time, but there's a big difference between having heartburn just every now and again, you know, once a month, once every couple of months when you kind of eat something you shouldn't do, or you know, you have a night out on the drink or something like that, and then you have heartburn as a result of these obvious reasons that you can control. There's a big difference between that kind of situation and people having heartburn every day, every week, etc. But just pulling out of the clinical research in the medical system, depending on which country you look at, roughly about half the people that they talk about have heartburn once a year. So about half the population in the Western world has heartburn once a year. About 25%, or about a quarter, has heartburn monthly. And then about 15% has heartburn weekly. That's when it starts to get way too high, in my opinion. You should not be having heartburn on a weekly basis. And then about 5 to 10% of the population has heartburn on a daily basis. That used to be me. I used to have heartburn pretty much every single day, and it was very uncomfortable and not particularly pleasant for me to have at all. In my case, it was being caused by H Pylori, but there are many causes and reasons for the development of heartburn. Now, heartburn is kind of the colloquial term that we all tend to use when we're describing these kinds of symptoms to our friends. But the technical term for heartburn that typically is used more in the medical system is acid reflux. Now, acid reflux is where acid splashes back up from your stomach into your esophagus. It creates a burning sensation, and you feel that burning sensation in here, and that's why it's called heartburn. But there's another reason why heartburn might develop that isn't necessarily related to acid reflux. So it's important to just differentiate between these terms. Stomach inflammation, where your stomach tissue gets inflamed, it gets red and sore, and it burns, even without acid reflux, can also lead to heartburn-like symptoms as well. So we just have to be careful. Heartburn is a term that kind of encompasses everything. Acid reflux is very specific to having acid splashing back up into the esophagus. Stomach inflammation or gastric inflammation is where the stomach tissue is inflamed, and that might still cause a lot of discomfort even if you don't have the acid splashing back up into your esophagus. Now, as I said a couple of moments ago, it is not normal to have heartburn with this kind of frequency. I personally think that having it annually, you're probably okay. So we don't have too much to worry about if you have heartburn once a year. I think by the time you get to having it monthly, you want to start to look at your lifestyle and try and figure out why that heartburn might be triggered. Look for any patterns. Is it something you eat once a month? Is it something you drink? Is it stress? Is it something like that? By the time we get to weekly and daily, and maybe every couple of weeks, every 3 weeks, we've got to get worried. If it's every day, it's definitely a major concern. If it's every week, it's a concern. It is definitely not normal and not right to have heartburn that frequently. Now, why do I feel so strongly about this? Well, the reason I feel so strongly about it is as I said, we pass off, if we're not careful, heartburn as just this day-to-day symptom that's normal. It's part of normal life. I don't believe that's the case. I think people feel that way or believe that that's the case because so many people have heartburn. So you talk to your mates at work, you talk to your friends at school, you talk to your mates at bingo club or wherever it is, work colleagues, sports colleagues, friends, family, etc. And everybody has a bit of heartburn now and again, and so we just go, it must be normal then, we don't have to do anything about it. But the problem is this: they did a study that was published in the New England Journal of Medicine in 1999. Now, the New England Journal of Medicine is not just a crappy little journal that has a few readers here or there. It's in the top 5 or 6 medical journals on earth. It's just, it's a big player in the medical realm. Now, the study, without going into too much detail, and I don't want to get too hung up on these numbers because I'm going to explain what they mean in writing underneath the video, because it's not easy to explain what this actually means. What they basically said was, you take a bunch of people who have esophageal cancer, there's a much, much, much higher chance that they had heartburn for many years leading up to the diagnosis of the cancer than people who did not have cancer and who were quite healthy. So what that basically showed is there was a very strong association between the incidence of heartburn and acid reflux for many, many years leading up to the cancer diagnosis compared to people who didn't have cancer, and they had a lot less heartburn. Now, that's not absolutely showing that there's a cause and effect relationship between heartburn and acid reflux and cancer, but it really infers that there's a very strong association between the two. So, for me and you, what that basically means is if we have heartburn on a frequent basis and we just leave it and we don't do anything about it because we think it's just normal and we succumb to this idea that it's a part of everyday life, if we leave that heartburn for many, many years, then there's a much higher chance that we're going to develop some kind of esophageal cancer and also gastric cancer as well in the upper part of the stomach. And so I think we've got to be really careful not to just, be very blasé about heartburn. If we have heartburn, we need to do something about it. So going back to my own case, when I had the heartburn, I could have just said, it's part of life. I'll go and get some medications from the doctor just to suppress the acid, or I'll go to the chemist or the pharmacy and I'll just get some Gaviscon or some Tums and I'll just live with it. I'll suppress the symptoms and make my life more livable and more bearable without really getting to the underlying reason why the heartburn's there. And if I'd done that, and if I just left the H pylori there for 20 years, 25 years or beyond, then I would have been at a much higher risk of developing some sort of cancer later on in life. And so I don't want to scare you, I don't want to frighten you with this information, but I just want to make sure you understand that a little bit of heartburn today might lead to significant problems later on if you don't deal with the underlying reason for the heartburn in the first place. So as I said, we're going to look at all the ins and outs of heartburn, the causes, why it develops, whether it's food, whether it's H pylori, whether it might be even a structural problem with the hiatal hernia that some people have, those kinds of things. And I'm going to give you lots of hints and tips on how to find out what the underlying cause is in your individual case, and lots of hints and tips on what to do to get rid of the heartburn once and for all. So I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I will look forward to opening the can of worms, if you like, in the heartburn area in the forthcoming videos. Thanks a lot.